Hello, Night Nation. Trace Rolko here, joined by Adam Eaton. Welcome in to Sons of UCF Live. Adam, hello to you. How are you?
Greetings, Trace. I am well. My voice is starting to rebound a little bit, so I think I can make it through a full 60-minute show, of which we have a lot to cover. We have football, basketball, and a bunch of mailbag questions, big 12 minutes. We got the whole gamut tonight, Trace. I'm excited.
That is true. There was some breaking football news in this spring break week for UCF students. Knights versus Naughts. That is what is coined for the spring game coming up on April 12th, 7 o'clock at the Bounce House. Includes player skill challenges. We saw some of that a year ago, as well post-game field access for fans. UCF likes to call it storming the field, and you can buy into the game as fans. That's the part that struck me as most interesting through Kingdom NIL, and I'm curious which of these most interested you, price point notwithstanding. How about running out of the tunnel for $250? Would you care to do that?
I wouldn't mind doing that, although if spring game, I could live without a spring game, so I'll say no to that one.
Design a helmet for $400.
I was confused on this. Do I get to keep the helmet as well, or am I just designing it for somebody else?
I am not entirely sure.
If I get to keep the helmet,
on
I may be in on that. If I just design it and then it like goes and sits in a library someplace, I don't need that. So if I can keep the helmet, I'm a strong maybe on that.
maybe. Kick an extra point, $1,500.
Yeah, I think we saw our friend Zach last year try the extra points. That's the line of embarrassment is too heavy for me there. So I'm also gonna shy away from that one because that may be filmed, and I don't want that in my life. You know how these people are savages on the internet, Trace. I don't need that.
Which would be easier for you? Kick an extra point for $1,500 or catch a punt for $1,500?
I'd rather try to kick. I think catching the punt, there's all like you're going forwards, backwards, you're tripping over yourself. Maybe you get that running start. That could end in like a painful disaster. You missed a field goal. You missed a field goal. You look like an idiot. But the punt thing, you could have to speed up quickly. Your pants fall down or something. You trip over your feet. I don't know. I'm gonna go. I'd rather kick the field goal than try to catch the punt.
As someone DM'd me today, what if it was JP Gilbert gets to catch a punt and the coaching staff gets to tackle JP? How much would that generate from fans?
I think, yeah, listen, I think if you just gave me like a 40-yard dash between like Gus and JP, like some form of a contest between the two, I would be in on all that too. I think the item I would want to do, Trace, I think I saw on that list. I don't remember the price point. Keep me honest on this. I would like to call a play. There was an option to call a play from a pre-approved play sheet. As you know, I have a fantasy or a flag football record here of great play calling. I'd love to call a play if I could. That's what I'd love to be in on.
$2,000, Adam, to call a play, be
right,
co-offensive coordinator. We've got a lot of those. Tim Harris, Darren Hinshaw, from a pre-approved playbook. If you spent $2,000, would you want to call
Yes.
Xavier Townsend across his body, throw him into the end zone?
No, I'm pulling a Rudy where I get to the huddle and I go, screw that. Here's what we're doing, and I'm just drawing it up in the dirt. I'm not, I'm taking Gus's play sheet and throwing out the window. We're running something fun. We're 4 verts. We're doing something.
$2,000 defensive coordinator. You get to call a play from the pre-approved playbook. We heard defensive coordinator Ted Roof say, "We're going to put the guys on the field that tackle the guys with the ball." Would that be part of your pregame hype speech?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a. I mean, I think you need to give me more for my money now. I'm gonna call a play. Hey, the guy with the ball, tackle him. Like I don't know what kind of play. Are you calling a blitz? Like I don't know what you're calling there. So I need more for my money at $2,000 if you're gonna make me one of the 7 co-defensive coordinators.
This is, again, one that would be for many fans, right? All of those keyboard warriors on the message boards, on social media, $5,000 benefiting Kingdom NIL to coach alongside Gus Malzahn. You get some gear, jersey. I like this, the media obligation at Mellow Mushroom. I'd like to see their media obligation at the podium after
well, that's where I need JP Gilbert. I need JP Gilbert and Gus arm in arm at the podium. I'll pay some money for that, Trace.
I like this, though. We're not that far removed from Mackenzie Milton playing cornhole over at Island Wing Company. We've evolved the NIL experience around UCF.
Yeah, look, I think, the more creative you can be, UCF's always been a little bit of the forbearing on this side, right? Of trying to be creative. And I think the more you can get fans integrated, you can create experiences. Yeah, buying memorabilia is cool and all, but an experience is something you can't really replicate, right? So if you can find experiences to give fans, I think that's a cool way to tie some stuff together now. And UCF's never been shy about being creative in that space. So we'll see if they can come up with something, even from a jersey perspective or what that looks like. But you got to applaud them for at least always thinking forward ahead. Even this week, I'm sure we'll talk about it in softball. They got their own little section they set up out there, right? And they're doing their own little watch party tailgate situation, right? You got to applaud them for always being a little bit outside the box and coming up with new creative ideas to try to engage fans, but also benefit Kingdom NIL at the end of the day.
And if successful, and I can't imagine why these opportunities wouldn't sell out very, very quickly. You'd like to see it expand to other sports, right? Softball, baseball, play black and gold games in the fall. Other opportunities for fans, I think Night Nation would jump at that.
Yeah, I think these are unique experiences that you're not going to get anywhere else, right? You can't just go to the bookstore and buy, buy first at bats at the softball game, right? So I think the more you can find ways to integrate the fans like this and have some experiences, I think people will be all in on, right? I'm curious to see how much of this sells out and how many of these options. I think I saw up to 2 for most of these, right? So curious to see. I guess we can tell on the field of a day of the spring game what that looks like, but. I think there's an appetite. I think there's a market, and people would want to be involved in stuff like this. And it goes to the cause that we all want to support, right? Which is UCF athletics. So it's a win-win.
I'm not SJ Tui, but I'm telling you, if there's a third guy that wants to coach alongside Gus Malzahn, I'm taking his $5,000 and saying you too can call a play.
That's a smart move. Again, I'm stumbling for JP Gilbert. We need to start a GoFundMe. I need JP and Gus, visor and visor, sitting next to each other with clipboards, duking out the next play call. I think that's what Night Nation deserves.
We've joked for some time about Suns Plus, and I travel. You have occasionally been out. You don't miss many shows. You're the Cal Ripken Jr. of the Sons of UCF team. But I think if you're going to co-host now, you got to ante in after this by Kingdom NIL. I don't think we're giving away anything anymore. I think what's the premium now for Brian Peterson to introduce the mailbag? What are we slapping on that?
I mean, I'll throw it up. Yeah. Well, I mean, what are the options? I mean, as Kramer would say, interesting trades accepted, right? I think I'm open to whatever the ideas are there. I mean, let's start the bidding. Let's start the bidding now.
I think we should consider that. How much would you pay to coach a player or two of UCF men's basketball? Would you draw up? The Knights, of course, now out of playing. They lose in the NIT's first round to the team from Tampa, 83-77, finished 17-16 overall. You watched the game. You were a little under the weather. I'm sure that didn't make things any easier. What were your quick observations?
Yeah, from the jump, it just seemed like the Cows wanted it more. They were flying around a little bit more aggressively. They seemed like they were more active on both sides of the court. And then they got hot, Trace, and they started hitting threes. They shot above their skis. I think we did this on Around the Kingdom, 54% on the night. They were 37% on the season. So they clearly shot above their skis. It felt like this game meant a little bit more to them. There was kind of more juice, more energy. UCF seemed a little lethargic early on, a lot of silly turnovers. Didn't really settle down for a while. It seemed like the press and the sort of the zone, sort of that mini half court press zone that the Cows were running really was giving UCF fits. Some silly fouls by Darius Johnson, gets in foul trouble. It just seemed like we never connected, and it's almost like they didn't want to be there. Now, it didn't help being down, CJ Walker, who's been a big part of the lineup. DeMar Langford, who, while he doesn't score a ton, gives you some minutes off the bench. Is kind of a big, athletic, strong body. Didn't help being down some of your rotation guys, but it just seemed like from the tip off that the Cows, this was their Super Bowl. They were waiting to get here and prove this game. And it seemed like UCF was just kind of going through the motions, and before you know it, you're down a bunch. And we've seen UCF do this time and time again, right? You try to scramble your way back, and they just didn't have the horses and the fortitude to be able to pull it off late in the game.
Cows with 9 threes in the first half, 49 points. Remember earlier this season, UCF lost at Houston by 15, but gave up 57 points in a 57-42 loss at Houston. They gave up 49 in the first half. I asked Coach Dawkins, hey, why the loss?
2 possession loss. You go 12 of 23 from the line. How much does that sting?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, it kills us. That's, to me, if you want to say, if you mention one thing that's the ball game, That's the ball game. We didn't shoot from the line with 52% from the line. I mean, you can't go on a game like this against another good team and shoot that poorly from the free throw line.
Says it all, right?
Agree.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting is what Jalen Sellers brought up in the post game. Let's listen to him. Did this team underachieve?
I would kind of say we underachieved this season. Just with the group of guys that we had in that room, probably be the best team I've ever been on. So I think we underachieved. No matter where they put us at, we underachieved by far. We underachieved.
That's an interesting discussion, right? Picked 14th, finished 7-11 during the regular season, 3 top 25 wins. Interesting to hear him say underachieved. I think that's what leads to some fan frustration, is that there were a lot of these 1-2 possession losses over the course of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the macro, right? UCF was far and head and shoulders better than I think we thought they would be in the Big 12, right? But once you saw that there was an ability for them to be competitive, I think that all of our expectations changed. So I think you can make that argument. I listened to his comments more around the lines of, it's interesting if you want to read into it, though. It seems like he's saying, hey, I know what this team is capable of. I know what my teammates are capable of, and we just didn't live up to that. That makes you wonder why, right? If he's seen something in his teammates in practice and the way that they prepare and the way they've studied film that led him to think that we could be much better than this, then the natural question is, well, Jalen, why did that not happen on the court? What was missing there? And I think that's the interesting part is I'll give the kid a pass saying, hey, this is the best team I've ever been on, and I love these guys. But how did that not translate onto results in the court? How did you not pull some of those games out? How did you not make some of those late game shots? I think that's the why question I would love to have Jalen follow up and tell us more about, is what he thinks the disconnect was and why they weren't able to achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Well, press conference after press conference, he would say, we need to play 40 minutes. We didn't play 40 minutes. That was a theme throughout the season. You continually heard him say that. I think we saw some glimpses of that, right, where they did play a full game and got some wins. But it is interesting, his comments there and the debate of underachieved or overachieved.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think again, there was, save for what, the Kansas State game, maybe one of the Houston games. I mean, UCF was in every game, right? Like down to the stretch, it's a 1, 2, 3 possession game. They're making a comeback, right? They were in most of the contests they played this year, and it just felt like every game there was that one thing, right? Either we didn't shoot good from the line, or we had a late silly turnover, or the referees blew some crazy whistles, right? It was just seemed like there was one thing every game that you just couldn't put it together. And so from a player standpoint, I can see him saying, hey, we did underachieve because we were in all these things and we could have won those. It's interesting though. Jalen says he's coming back though, Trace, right? He's coming back for one more ride. Put it out on social media. He was obviously very vehemently backing Coach Dawkins as well. So maybe he'll get a chance to get in the lab this summer and work on some of those things to make sure that the underachievement in his mind doesn't happen again next year.
Perfect segue. You know who else is back? Ben Hazel is back. Former UCF development coach, has been joining us all season long on Sons of UCF Live. Ben, hello.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, fellas. I know we didn't win last week, but I think this season still deserves the flowers and the bow tie look. So I decided to just put it on today. You know, good excuse in my book.
We like bow tie, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about this loss. That, you know, pre-game, the media availability the day before, Jalen Sellers said USF reminded him a lot of BYU, and I said, yeah, he didn't do very well against BYU, and you know, he's all right, you know, but this is going to be different. 9 threes in the first half for USF, and it was reminiscent of some of what we saw with BYU's success there as well.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that Jalen, I don't know if he knows, saying that it's like BYU, we haven't learned our lesson yet. So they're that similar, like they did the same thing, gave up a bunch of threes. So we fell asleep. We got, you know, had a few mistakes early on, and they took advantage of it. I mean, honestly, when I watched that game, it looked like they were playing with a different motivation than us, and they were clearly had some personal things going on. Whether they were valid or not, I know being in that situation, you know, as a mid-major, your coach always, no matter the team that you're playing, especially now that we're in the Big 12, they're always going to say that we tried to schedule them this year and they told us no. So you're telling that all week. And that, it kind of had that feel like, hey, they came out like they had something to prove. And our guys definitely still competed, but I think that little bit of extra motivation did show up.
What do you make of Jalen's comments about he feeling the team underachieved when, of course, there are so many metrics, 7-11 in conference play during the regular season, the wins over Kansas, Texas on the road. There's so many reasons you could say they overachieved. They past expectations.
Yeah, it's something that Coach Dawkins preaches. So he's really just kind of reiterating kind of the attitude that, the whole coaching staff pretty much is saying the entire season, which is it's all relative, right? Like we outperformed expectations for the people that weren't involved in the program directly, right? So Coach Dawkins always talks about our standards are our standards. So what we do and how we view ourselves is something that we hold true and only care about in this gym. What everybody else says is not really, doesn't really matter. So, of course, we outdid expectations by a lot, but as a player, you're not really happy with what you accomplished this season. Weren't able to get out of the first round of the tournament, kind of bottom half, and didn't necessarily get to advance in the NIT like you really kind of felt like you're capable of. So that's why, I think Jalen and the rest of the team, are still pretty down and not necessarily satisfied. But that is also why I feel like there are a lot of big things to come in Orlando, just because the expectation of our program from the people involved is a lot different, right? Like we used to be shocked and excited about beating Michigan, in an out-of-conference game. That's a big moment. Now it's kind of like, hey, we expect to beat teams that we think we're better than, So that is what Jalen was saying, and I'm 100% agreeing. So I don't think if you played on the team, you would be, really content with what happened this past season.
Ben, looking at the season in totality, what's one thing that surprised you about this version of the Knights basketball team?
Well, I mean, we already talked about it. They overachieved in the wins column, but I think really just how hard they competed was probably the biggest shocker, right? Like when we look at it on paper, I mean, this isn't Coach Dawkins' most talented team. I mean, we had some games where we had stretches where we really just could not score, but the team competed at a level that we hadn't seen in a long time. I would say probably around since, the BJ Taylor and the Aubrey Dawkins days. So that was something that really stuck out and really shocked me in how hard the entire team played for, full 40 minutes. Of course, we would like to be smarter. That would have led to wins, but the effort, being down 20, being up, all those things, the effort was pretty consistent, which is something I was, looking back at it, very proud of.
Conversely, what's one thing that frustrated you about this year's Knights team?
I think I said it every week, man. We gotta make a shot. Like as a fan, it's always more entertaining when at least it's back and forth. So when we're having those games where we're having really just long droughts of not scoring, whether it's not even being able to get to the free throw line, that was probably the most, kind of disheartening part of the season. But again, as a coach, when you're not having to worry about effort and attitude, which is something that, you typically have to deal with at some point in the season, with all these new guys, I was still very happy with kind of how they embraced the things that Coach Dawkins was saying and preaching and really went out there and laid it on the line pretty much every night, in my opinion.
So there's a portion of the fan base, I think it's outsized. You see it in message boards, you see it on social media, that are frustrated with what they consider over the course of Coach Dawkins' tenure at UCF, a kind of a middling performance a lot of seasons. What do you think is a fair criticism from fans? I know everybody wants to win and they want to win every game, but what do you think is a fair criticism on the part of the fan base?
A fair criticism, I mean, honestly, like it's a double-edged sword, right? So, of course, those close games, you always feel like it's, kind of the coach's responsibility or kind of the spear of the snake on why we didn't necessarily get that win. But when I kind of looked at the team, I mean, I think Coach Dawkins got as much as he could out of these guys this past season. Probably, if I'm going to be like nitpicky of a Coach Dawkins job, is just maybe being a little more open to making some adjustments in different situations, right? As teams kind of started to switch up, changing defenses, guarding us different ways, especially during that stretch before our last 3 or 4 games, when teams were really letting us shoot. I felt Coach could maybe have gotten a little more creative in trying to get different looks. But, of course, that's easier said than done because in the middle of the season is the last time when you're trying to show new things, especially on the offensive end. But that's probably the only like fair criticism, I would say. They did a great job defensively. The team really kind of followed Coach Dawkins' coaching. They had some laps on defense, but our biggest issue was offense. So, like, honestly, this past season, I think Coach made, turn those lemons into lemonade. He didn't have a full deck, had some injuries throughout the season. And then, honestly, throughout this season, this was probably one of the better coaching jobs I've seen Coach Dawkins do in a long time.
You've seen him at practice, perhaps in the locker room, right? Fans don't get to see that. What about a criticism that the team's energy level maybe reflects his as we see him courtside? More cerebral guy. He's not going to be a yeller and a screamer during a game. Maybe they settle into that. Maybe they lack a little fire, a little passion themselves.
I couldn't agree with that one, just because in practice, trust me, it is not calm and it is not chill. And you also got to understand that Coach Dawkins knows about himself. So he strategically surrounds himself with specific basketball minds and basketball personalities. So Coach Norris is the specific coach on the team that brings an absorbent amount of fire to everything that he comes to. So the games, pregame, practice, he's screaming. Coach Dawkins might chime in with some fire here and there. Coach Mamadou, like all the coaches, as far as motivation is concerned, I don't think the players can use the coaches as the reason if they're not motivated. But like, we're in the Big 12. If you got to use a coach to get motivated, you're in the wrong sport.
Well, Ben, I hate to bring this up, but according to Jeff Ehrman of Inside Maryland Sports, he's reporting today that Kevin Norris is potentially going to go to Maryland to fill an open assistant coach's role on that staff. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if you know if that's true or not. I'm going to ask you that. But if that is true, how big a loss is Coach Norris potentially leaving to go to Maryland?
That would be a huge loss. I mean, Coach Norris is a big part. He brings a ton of energy, like I just said. I mean, he's a really down-to-earth guy, one of the younger coaches on the staff. He's one of the coaches that is extremely relatable to the guys. But if he goes to Maryland, I mean, I would be extremely excited for him. He's from the Baltimore area, so that fit does make a lot of sense. Great recruiter. So it'll definitely be a hole for us. But I think Coach Dawkins, when coaches leave, it's typically not their first year of looking for an opportunity. So Coach Dawkins, I think, has put his staff in a great position to where he will be missed, but the program is in a spot where, kind of things will continue to roll if he does, move on to greener pastures.
Well, Ben, take us into Coach Dawkins' office. What's he doing today, right? Season's over, portal's open, right? You're trying to retain your guys. You're trying to look at, your recruiting class coming in. You're probably trying to watch the tournament, right? Because he's a basketball junkie and it's on all day today. Coaches are leaving. What's on Coach Dawkins' agenda these next couple of days? What are the first things you kind of do as the season comes to an end?
There's a handful of things, right? So one, Coach Dawkins is probably, going through that stage of reviewing what went well, what didn't go well. And what are some things they can improve on internally? That's number one. And then, I mean, pretty much the assistant coaches will be a part of that conversation, but they're also tasked with, hey, what's this portal looking like today, right? So that stuff doesn't wait. So I know Coach Dawkins it's a change for Coach Dawkins, especially when the transfer rules weren't as loose. You didn't necessarily have to get on that. I mean, you're kind of on that and tracking it throughout the season nowadays. So I'm sure they're having strong conversations with who's in the portal, who we've been talking to, who's strongly considering, who do we need to recruit more, things like that. And also figuring out who's staying. So he'll have year-end wrap-up meetings, probably not this week, but next, right before they start workouts the week after. So he's just probably digesting everything, trying to find out who's going to be here, who's going to be at workouts, who's potentially leaving. There's no rest for the weary as a head coach. I'll tell you that.
Well, Ben, you don't have to give me a name here, but give me what's the profile of a guy you think UCF's looking at in the portal? I mean, what kind of makeup do you think UCF's trying to target from a player standpoint?
A slashing wing, a scoring wing. I don't even want to say slasher because that kind of insinuates that he can't shoot. A scoring wing. Somebody that similar to Jalen, like you can give the ball, but just got a little more size, similar to a Chi-Chi, but somebody that's a little more aggressive, a little more assertive. I think that's the specific hole that they're looking to fill first. And then, of course, Mamadou is always looking for solid bigs. to come kind of round out that front court. There's never a shortage of that. So those are probably the two areas I would say, because you got Jalen coming back, you got Darius coming back, you got Mikey Williams coming into the fold. So we got some talent at the guard spot that I think the Orlando fan base should be excited about.
You mentioned some of the names there. We don't know who may else enter the portal at some point, but we know who's leaving. What's the biggest loss there?
Probably, I would say in the front court. I mean, because we're retaining a lot of the guard space. It's really what we're losing in the front court is probably what's going to hurt the most. I mean, we led the country in blocks. That's like an anchor of our defense. One thing is when Coach Dawkins has really good bigs on the defensive end, we tend to have a top 10 defensive team. I mean, shout out to Taco, right? So I think they're trying to replace that is probably, where we'll feel it the most next year, at least with how our roster is right now.
Again, not knowing who might enter the portal, we've heard Jalen Sellers say he's returning, Darius Johnson, and some of those other names. A lot of fans are saying, all right, tournament team a season from now. Is that a fair expectation for year 2 in the Big 12?
No, because I don't know who's in the Big 12. So, if Kansas returns to form and actually gets some pros like they're used to having, there's a lot of things that can change. We haven't even gotten through the first round. I mean, the Big 12 actually hasn't been looking that good in March so far. So, we talked about it being the best conference in the country. Our record right now in these tournaments is not looking too good as a conference. But it's too early to tell. Like we can't really say. With where we're at now, it's going to come down to how we schedule that non-conference and how we handle the in-conference are the two sides of the coin that'll play a huge part in making this tournament. So a lot of moving pieces. That's too early for us to start speculating that it's tournament or bust. I mean, go from 12th to the tournament expectations. That's a huge leap. I don't know if UCF has ever come in a season with the expectation of tournament or bust, but I say that's a good thing.
It'd be interesting, right? The addition of some new teams, those Pac-12 teams, and what's this schedule going to look like? Might they play 20 games? Might it reduce the non-conference portion of the schedule? Imagine a 20-game Big 12 schedule.
It'll feel like the non-conference just because you won't play teams twice and the travel, right? Like you're still going to the west. You still got to go out west for probably long stints. So that normal switch that you feel of being in conference where games are a lot closer, it's not really the case anymore. So it'll kind of all mesh together, honestly, I feel like with how everything is changing.
Ben, we've loved having you all season long to break down things for us. We'll call upon you again when there may be a story that warrants it, a player signing or something of that nature. And we'd love you in the bow tie.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a great season. Hopefully we'll have some more bow ties in store for the future. But go Knights, and hopefully next year we'll have some more good stuff to talk about.
Ben Hazel, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate you, Ben. See ya.
All right, you heard Ben mention it, right? What Kansas State's out of the NIT, Cincinnati advances, BYU knocked out of the NCAA tournament. Of course, Knights already out. Let's go to Jeff Allen now for a look around the Big 12.
March Madness has arrived, and the Big 12 has yet again a big footprint in this year's tournament. In the East region, BYU is a 6 seed, battled the 11 seed Duquesne earlier today. I recorded this report prior to the game, as I am currently immersed in my annual tradition of taking the first 2 days of the tournament off from my day job to consume the games, chicken wings, and beer. So check your favorite .com sports site for the result of that one, as well as the Midwest region between the 7 seed Texas and 10 seed Colorado State, and the East region matchup of the 2 seed Iowa State versus the 15 seed South Dakota State. After Suns live at 9:40 on CBS in the South region, Texas Tech is the 6th seed taking on the 11 seed North Carolina State, and at 9:55 on TBS in the Midwest region, 4-seeded Kansas squares off against the 13 seed Samford. Rounding up first round action tomorrow at 12:40 on True TV, Baylor, the 3 seed in the West, takes on Colgate, the 14 seed. At 9:20 on TNT, the top seed in the South, Houston, plays Longwood, the 16 seed. And at 9:55 on TBS, TCU, the 9 seed, battles 8 seed Utah State in the Midwest region. In the NIT, you're already aware of the UCF loss to the Cows. Kansas State was eliminated by Iowa. Cincinnati moves on after their first round win over San Francisco. In the women's NCAA tournament, the action kicks off Friday as Texas is the number 1 seed in the Portland 4 bracket. They entertain Drexel at 3 o'clock on ESPNU. At 4:30 in the Albany 2 bracket, 4-seeded Kansas State tips against the 13-seed Portland on ESPN News. At 6 o'clock, Baylor is the 5 seed in the Portland 3 bracket where they face Vanderbilt, the 12 seed on ESPNU. At 7:30 on ESPN2 in the Portland 4 bracket, Iowa State, the 7 seed, draws Maryland, the 10 seed. Saturday first round action features Kansas against Michigan in an 8-9 game in the Portland 3 bracket at 2 o'clock on ESPN News. Oklahoma battles Florida Gulf Coast in a 5-12 matchup at 4 o'clock, also on ESPN News in the Albany 1 bracket. And at 5:30 on ESPN2 in the Albany 2 bracket, it's West Virginia against Princeton in an 8-9 pairing. Enjoy the madness with your Big 12 Minute. I'm Jeff Allen.
I like that comment right there. We need Jeff Allen to do our weather for us. We started off the show talking
traffic and weather on the 5s with Jeff Allen.
Yeah, we talked a little football off the top, and then basketball. Let's bring in the beat reporter from the Orlando Sentinel, Matt Michelle, covers the Night's football and basketball. Is it a 2 bow tie show? No bow tie.
No bow tie tonight. Sorry.
Ben had the bow tie on. I should have mentioned there was a bit of a dress code for this one, the guest portion of the show. Matt, I see you several times a week. Fans do not get that opportunity. I do want to begin with a lot of your posts on social media. You're a bit of a foodie, aren't you?
Yeah. My wife and I really enjoy, cooking, and when I'm on the road, I love to hit all sorts of restaurants and check it out. And so it's been kind of a passion of ours.
What has been your first day of March Madness and bracket busting specials at the Michelle House?
It's been brisket. It was a 6-pound brisket with some sausage. We had ribs. We also had brought in, but we didn't actually touch those tonight. Collard greens, coleslaw, pumpkin pie. It was a full spread it's kind of like a tradition in our household. March Madness is like a holiday for us.
Gotcha. That's pretty good.
Yeah. What time should we be over, Matt? I mean, we'll be there.
There's plenty of leftovers. Believe me. So.
I did see you posted yesterday about a plant-based macaroni and cheese. Did I see that correct?
Yeah, actually, Kraft mac and cheese has now come out with a plant-based version of the favorite that everyone loves. The macaroni and cheese from Kraft, and I've been lactose intolerant for about over a decade now, and one of the things I really, really miss is a good mac and cheese, and like the old Kraft mac and cheese. And so when I saw that, I had to order a couple boxes, and I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I want to try it out because I'm interested in knowing if it tastes just like it did when I remember, like from years ago when I was in college and a kid and everything. So I'm hoping it does, because it would kind of change the game for me, because I really do love mac and cheese, but when you can't have really real cheese, it's kind of difficult to get.
I think this is a YouTube channel in the making right here, Matt. Tries out plant-based mac and cheese. That'll be the first episode. Before we move on to talk a little spring football, behind us a week, and they're getting ready to resume. What's your wrap up, your bow tie on this men's basketball season?
Well, I think in some regards, they overachieved. I think it's what they talked about after the game. Early Wednesday morning. In some ways they overachieved. You look at what they were able to do. They didn't finish last in the conference. They won 3 games against ranked opponents for the first time in program history. They had 7 wins. I think you've heard from a lot of coaches in the Big 12 who talked about, what a challenge it was to face UCF at home, how the crowd was outstanding. So I think they hit some marks here and there. Now, I think they also missed some points. They were down double digits in, what was it, like 11 of the 18 Big 12 regular season games this year. They fell behind early. They spent so much energy trying to get back into games that by the time they got into them at the end, it was they ran out of steam. So I think there's some pieces there they're going to have to figure out what's going to work, for the Big 12. And I think it's something Johnny talked a little bit about is, where can we take that next step? Who do you bring in that maybe helps some things out? And it's going to be an interesting offseason. They're losing some talented players that are going to leave, and they're going to have to find some pieces to maybe work around there. The portal is such a game changer in college basketball. You can flip a roster really in one off season. So if they can do a good job in the portal, I think they have an opportunity. But next season is going to be tough. I think I heard you talk a little bit about this earlier that it could be a 20-game Big 12 season, which would be unbelievable. And then you look at the fact you're adding new programs like Arizona, which is in the tournament this year, and you're bringing in Colorado, who's in the tournament, and Arizona State. I mean, so you've got some new teams to throw in there in the mix as well. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think that's. And then of course the biggest offseason question is what's the future of Johnny Dawkins? He's got 1 year left, and there hasn't been any sort of scuttle on whether they're going to give him an extension or whether they're going to move on from him. So a lot of kind of uncertainty, but I think this program feels like it's on the right track. It just remains to be seen what their offseason looks like.
Matt, let's switch to football here. Does it feel weird to be covering a spring practice and there's no QB controversy?
It actually does. I mean, last year wasn't one with John Rice in a way, but it was more of us. We were wondering how he was balancing football and baseball at the same time. Now this year, I think it's not, there is no controversy. I think you look at the backup roles. I think that's probably the closest thing you could have to one. It looks like Timmy McClain's probably going to be the number 2 guy, but Dylan Risk has taken a lot of third team snaps, and the coaching staff seems to like him. So you have to feel like maybe there could be a little battle there, but honestly, no, KJ Jefferson's going to be the guy. I mean, I think he's just getting acclimated to the system and the pieces around him. But it is nice not to have to worry about that, not to have to keep asking coaches who's going to be the quarterback, who's going to do this. Even the same thing. Think about this. Even at the running back spot, you don't have to sit there and ask who's going to be the starting running back. Same thing when it comes to the wide receiver. Who's going to be the number 1, wide receiver on this team? You've got a lot of these positions kind of the main guys are kind of set up. Now it's more about who are going to be some of the ancillary guys who step in and kind of help out and be contributing pieces. So that's what makes, I think, spring and going into fall kind of interesting.
Well, at the end of the season last year, Matt, Gus was very adamant that 6-7 was not acceptable, his first losing season as a coach. And he put his money where his mouth is. He went out and made some changes to the coaching staff. He shook some things up a little bit. What do you make of sort of the changes and the way he's kind of retooled his coaching staff for this upcoming season?
Well, I think the defensive one I kind of was expecting. I think it felt like because of how poor they were against the run, I think they had to make some moves. I mean, bringing in Ted Roof, a guy he's very familiar with, he coached with, who's kind of built his reputation on having solid, run defenses. Bringing him in, keeping Addison Williams there as well. Maybe Addison gets a little more of an opportunity to work under an experienced defensive coordinator, and maybe to help him grow a little bit. The offensive side was interesting to me just because, I mean, I didn't think if Gus was taking over the play calling duties, which we kind of have a feeling he was going to, the idea of adding in another offensive coordinator, so to speak, is just kind of an interesting angle. I know Tim Harris Jr. is a guy that Gus really likes, really has been a big piece of what he wants to do. We talked to Tim Harris and he said, man, he was excited to come back here and be a part of the staff. And, but then for him to move over to wide receiver, your coaching as well was kind of unique because he hadn't coached wide receivers in college. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic. And then, you have Tim Harris and you have Darren Hinshaw as a co-offensive coordinator. And, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting mix. So we know Gus is going to call the plays, but how are those other two guys going to really kind of fit in well? It's going to be a lot of contributions, but is it going to be more Darren does the passing game and Tim's more about the running game, and then they all just kind of submit their ideas, and then Gus just kind of takes them like a suggestion box and works through it and figures it out and then moves on? I mean that's kind of where I think the dynamic of the coaching staff is going to be interesting.
One change that's been a little under the radar, I thought about the other day when we had opportunity to speak with RJ Harvey. I looked at the podium, and the guy's arms are bigger than my legs. And there's a new strength and conditioning coach, and you spoke with Anthony Kinsey. What were your takeaways from that article that you can find at the Orlando Sun?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony it's interesting. He's another guy that, again, had connections with Gus, what played for him at Arkansas State, eventually went on to be a part of the Auburn strength conditioning system at Auburn under Gus. Had an opportunity. He went when Gus left, he went to Tennessee, actually worked under Josh Heupel. There's your UCF kind of 6 degrees of separation there. And then, Gus called him up and said, come on, we want to give you the head job, for strength and conditioning. And now he comes in here and his whole, I think his mantra really is it's about building a good foundation for them. And part of that is, making sure that they've built up enough reserve that in late in games they don't falter. That was one of the things that Anthony told me was he'd had a chance to watch some UCF games when he was at Tennessee last year, and he said the first thing that jumped off the film was late in the fourth quarter, just guys weren't able to finish out. I think the team got a little tired and guys weren't there, and so that's one of the things that he wanted to work on is let's make sure we can finish out, and let's make sure that when things get bad or things get tight or whatever's going on, that we don't just kind of lose our head. We've got to be able to have composure and be able to do those kind of things. And he's very much a family guy, very much loves having the players around. He's got a 12-year-old son that he wants to bring into the weight room and have the players get to meet and stuff like that. And so I think it's going to be an interesting piece for this, what they want to do. And you're right. I mean, RJ Harvey stands up to the podium and you're just like, you're blown away about it, how he looks. And I think you're seeing that with a lot of these players. I mean, maybe not so much dramatic, but I think if they can get bigger, stronger, faster, especially on the line and both lines, I think that's good news for UCF because they're going to need to do that. We saw that many times last year on the road, and even games at home against Big 12 teams. They kind of got pushed around, and I think the players have said that after the season that they felt like they kind of got pushed around a little bit. So I think getting bigger and stronger is going to be a big key issue for them.
You don't talk about brisket with Coach Kinsey, do you? That's not something.
No, but Herb Hand will sit down and talk to you.
Herb Hand.
I've had a 20-minute conversation about bacon with Herb Hand one time. So
there's the YouTube show, Matt. You and Coach Hand sampling cuisine across Central Florida. Another observation fans have asked me about it. First week of camp, I've said just a little more openness with the media, which sounds a little selfish, but we saw stretching drills, and now we're still seeing a little bit more play calling in that first week. Plus, not just the guys at the podium, some post podium scrums, talking to the players. You get to know them a little bit better and tell some better stories over the course of spring camp.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. I mean, listen, the Gus is actually trying to make an effort, and he said he brought all the media from the area together and said, what can we do to be better? And I think he mentioned, when he started off by saying, listen, I was guarded, obviously, from where he came from. Think about it. Was coming from Auburn. Auburn's got a lot of media that was, there was a lot of takes on his coaching. And so coming to Orlando is a little different. And, we've had, like you mentioned, we've had better opportunities, and that's really helped us out because we've got to see some guys that maybe we weren't familiar with, a Tyler Wren, for instance, a walk-on running back that had a pretty good game, a pretty good practice for a couple big plays on Friday, last Friday. And so, guys like that maybe you wouldn't necessarily get to see, you're starting to see a little bit and think, okay, well, maybe that might be a factor somewhere. Maybe seeing who some of the guys are that are on the first team, second team, third team, getting kind of rotated through, getting to see maybe how they're going to react. And then, as you mentioned, just having some one-on-ones and some little scrums with the players has been great. I mean, I've got to sit and we've learned a lot about some of the players they brought out. Xavier Townsend told me, we talked a little bit about getting bigger and faster. And he talked about how he runs about 22 miles per hour right now, and he would love to get to 24 and 25.
22?
22 is what he said, yes. So,
Jeez.
He would love to get to 24. So, just things like that where, Adrian Medley talked about how, he likes to bring the offensive linemen over and they barbecue. And then that kind of got into food, which, obviously I jumped in on and wanted to talk about. So, they're just things like that where you get to learn more about the players themselves. And I think that helps with the stories we cover, the stories we tell, whether it's writing or video, whatever. And I think the fans will appreciate that. And that's something I stressed to Gus when we had our meeting was you want to know that everyone wants to know more about these players, but when you only give us a couple minutes, it's not enough time to really get to develop relationships with them. And I think it's paid off, at least early on. Now let's see if that continues on through the fall camp.
That was just the first week of spring camp.
That's what I was going to say.
Let's see how that continues.
Matt, who's somebody on the defensive side of the ball? I think we're expecting probably most of the change we're going to see will be on that side of the ball. Who's a name or two of a guy that you think can have a big impact for the Knights this season on defense?
Well, I think to me it's going to come at that linebacker spot, because right now you've got a lot of unknowns at the linebacker. I think Ethan Barr comes in. He's a guy of transfer from Vanderbilt. Spoke with him the other day. A guy who really has, I think some big potential. Worked with, was coached by Ted Roof when he was at Vanderbilt. Has a familiarity there. Really was a captain with the Commodores. So a guy who you could see maybe have a big thing. I think another player who kind of fits that mold is Deshaun Pace, the former Cincinnati. I think they have him as a defensive back, but he's a versatile guy that talking with him, can play linebacker, can play safety, can play corner, really he's kind of a hybrid guy that they feel like they can move around. I think he's a guy really that can have a big impact on that defensive side of the football as well. And I think from there it's going to come down to just filling some holes. I think Brandon Adams had a pretty good first week of spring. He had some pretty good plays. I think he had an interception at one point in one of the scrimmages or one of the little practices we had. So kind of someone in the safety group who's going to step up and also make some plays. So we know how the defensive line is going to be pretty solid. We know that, Ricky's going to be Ricky. Lee Hunter's always going to be a good personality. And a lot of those guys, Malachi Lawrence and John Walker. But I think it's the linebackers and the safety guys where you're going to see some new faces that can maybe help out.
Well, you mentioned earlier, Matt, competitions are largely kind of sewn up in a lot of spots. I think the sexiest competition we have right now is for the place kicker. Colton Boomer obviously struggled at the end of last year. We know Grant Reddick is a renowned kicker. He's in camp as well. Any sense from what you saw in week 1 of practice where UCF's leaning from the place kicker perspective?
Not really. I mean, again, the place kickers are kind of off on their own. When you walk into practice, they're occasionally out there doing their stuff, but you don't get a lot of a sense of going on. You see them get rotated a lot, those two guys. Obviously, I think if Colton Boomer had finished stronger last year, if he hadn't maybe had that stretch where he was kind of a little shaky, I think it would have been no brainer going into this year. He was the guy. But I think what happens now is, there's going to be a little bit of this idea of, okay, it's going to be a competition. They want to see how he does, and they want to put him on the spot. I mean, I know that Gus liked Colton last year. Every time he'd have a miss or something, we'd ask him about after a game, and he would go on and say, Colton won us the Boise State game, and it's like, okay, yeah, we get that. But I think in the off season, I just think there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that, and I think this is where spring is going to kind of see where these two guys are at. Who's going to be the one coming out of spring and who's going to be the two. And then, going into fall, it's who can make the biggest leap over the summer months to get there. So it's going to be, I still think it's going to be a good competition, but I think both guys understand that.
We'll end with this a premise now that the Suns bankroll here. You can do any of those things Kingdom NIL is suggesting will occur during the spring game. But we're going to plunk $1,500 down. You kicking an extra point or you catching a punt?
Oh, wow. I think I would try to kick the extra point. I mean, I'm not
trying to give Colton Boomer a run for his job too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not. I mean, because me, I think it's a little less likely I'm going to hurt myself. I can imagine trying to catch a punt. I'm probably going to take it on the face. Now, listen, I was going to tweet this out, and I didn't get a chance to, but hey, if anyone wants to, for the price of a hot dog and a beer, you can come sit up in the press box, and you can get shouted at by people on social media if you want. I mean, I'll offer that up, but that's just.
We're selling access at UCF games. Matt Rochelle covers the Knights for the Orlando Sentinel. Matt, see you out there again soon.
All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. We're selling access.
I told you on that punt thing, you got more likeliness that you're going to get hurt or you're going to get super embarrassed on the punt thing. I'd rather kick the field goal.
Yeah. You have to judge the ball right, and it may hit you on the head. That's the whole thing. It's fraught.
Also, Matt made me hungry with all that food talk. So
I don't know about the plant.
I haven't had much of an appetite lately. But whatever all that, no. But whatever he described before that, that sounded delicious.
All right, time for some news and notes.
This is Michael, otherwise known as Emptiness on Twitter. You're watching the Sons of UCF. Let's go around the kingdom.
Michael, I'm trying to get him to come on the show, but I think
that's
all he wants to do. It's all the appearance he wants to do. A little more football talk. Pro Day, not going to be on the UCF campus. Everybody's gathering in Frisco, Texas. 137 Big 12 players include 17 UCF connected players. What do you think of that? It's going to stretch over 4 days. I think they want the media coverage, but I don't know what media members other than those regionally are going to commit to that many days in Frisco, Texas for pro days.
I think the hope, Trace, is that you get more NFL teams to actually show up, right? Like, so if it was just on UCF's campus, maybe 20 teams show up or whatever the number is, right? Where now you may get more scouts, more teams, maybe even some coaches coming to see some of these guys, work out, some of these guys, practice. And maybe that a guy, jumps off the screen at somebody. So I think for UCF players, this is probably a win, right? That they're going to be around other players, are going to be around a bunch of coaches and maybe gets more eyes on them than they anticipated. So hopefully it's a win-win for UCF and getting, a little bit more of an eyeball look from some of the more advanced scouts in the NFL.
Yeah, true. Baseball. on the road this weekend at Kansas. They took 2 of 3 against Oklahoma State, beat FAU midweek. Andrew Sundin with a blast that put them ahead for the win. Knights 13-5 overall, 2-4 in the Big 12. All games at Kansas on ESPN Plus. We mentioned Michael earlier. You can find his latest article. He's doing a great job breaking down UCF baseball. So if you miss a game or two during the week,
great detail.
read the article.
I know more about Kansas baseball than I ever wanted to in my entire life because I had to read the article as I posted it. So if you want an update on who we're playing, their strengths, Michael dials that stuff in, man. He's really good with that stuff.
He is very good at it. SonsofUCF.com. Softball back home. They got swept at number 4, Oklahoma State. So it gets easier returning home right now. Number 2, Texas. Texas that shut out, what was it, 10-0 over a top 20 ranked Florida State in a midweek game. Tough one for the Knights. You mentioned it earlier. They're taking over the left field and the outfield with some special seating and access to food and beverage, trying to generate some dollars. Going to be a packed house, sold out all weekend. Now, I know it got brought up on Around the Kingdom. I don't know what capacity is. Did I take the under of whatever Eric Lopez said, 1,300 or something? I don't know what capacity
You
is.
did take the under, but then he kind of like ha-ha'd you like he had some inside info and you were foolish. So I wouldn't feel good if I were you.
We recorded a day later because we wanted to get in that men's basketball NIT game. Here's a little of what we discussed on this week's Around the Kingdom. I don't know, rival? Is that the right word? There's still some juice in that rivalry.
No, that's the media nonsense. That's the media.
No, here's where you're picking at the media, right?
Yeah, they create this. And look, Black and Gold Banner Ed's just as guilty of this because they're like, oh, the war at I-4. Who the hell has given a bleep about a UCF-USF basketball game ever? Have you cared, Trace? Never. When have they played for significance? No. It's a made-up nonsense that fans and the media get sucked into every time this game is played. If anything, I think we prove why UCF should never play USF. What do you gain out of it, Trace? What do you gain out of it?
On Suns Plus, you can hear what word Eric used where he substituted.
I wish he would just be more passionate about his takes sometimes, Trey. I really just wish he would give you more passion behind his thought process. I don't understand.
Around the Kingdom on the Sons of UCF YouTube channel. All right, how much are we going to be charging Brian W. Peterson for this?
Well, we're going to have to make a whole new video, and that's going to be a lot of work. I don't know.
So it's a mailbag. So what?
So what? Do you know whose mailbag that is?
It's that time again. Time to open the Brian W. Peterson Sons of UCF mailbag.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, see, I can't replace that. That's just too good. That is just too good.
What about $100? $100. What about that, charging Brian to do the intro?
Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, or someone must have bid $150 and Brian's not there anymore. I don't know.
At Statboy Drew asking me if I enjoyed my break last week when I was in work meetings. Of course, he angling for a spot in my seat. That's now going to cost you money.
Wow.
Drew, we're charging to co-host the show. At Golden Knight _2. Remember, we collect questions Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and any late ones that I catch during the day on Thursdays at Golden Knight _2. Dawkins loses against the Cows at home in the NIT. Is that a fireable offense? Ain't happened so far, at least.
Yeah, the reason I would have said it's fireable is if we got blown out, right? If we lost by like 30 or 40, then I would go, hey, wait a minute, right? I mean, yeah, sure, we weren't in this game a ton and it was a bit of a struggle, but I think UCF played okay enough that, you know, you can say, all right, yeah, the Cows just played better. If we got blown out, then I would have been like, hey, we need to talk about that, Johnny. We need to talk.
At by C.A. Simmons, a happy birthday to Christian. You have to fire a current UCF head coach right now. Who and why? I'm asking you, Adam, because I am not answering that question.
I know you're not.
No.
You know what? I went Satya Messer only because obviously they had a really bad year and we're getting any better. I don't know, but you made me pick one, so I don't know the name of the rowing coach.
She's new.
She's safe. She's safe. I don't know her name, so congrats to her. So I went Satya Messer on this one. Sorry, coach.
3-15 in the first year of the Big 12. Ooh, you went out on a limb with that one.
Thank you.
At K-Chan 44, honest question. We like the dishonest ones as well. Does Johnny actually care about rivalry games? Last 3 outings in those games, teams come out flat, not fired up, focused at all. Why? I didn't like the energy level off the top of that game. I mean, I know you said USF wanted it more, was more fired up, more passionate.
I mean, Ben
should
said the
be able to
same
match
thing,
the
right?
energy.
Ben said the same thing. It looked like USF was more motivated to like come in there and play for some reason. I don't know that I say that Johnny doesn't, like rivalry games, but there certainly seemed to be some mojo that was off. And if you want to blame it on Johnny, you want to blame it on CJ Walker not playing, you want to blame it on guys being tired or hurt or disappointed they didn't make the tournament. I mean, it could be any number of things at that point. So I don't know if I'll blame that one strictly on Johnny, but certainly the Cows basketball team has had our number, which is disgusting.
Chris Bilowich, will UCF ever be a basketball school? I say no.
I mean, define basketball school, right? Like, I mean, you can be a good basketball team, but be a primarily predominant football school, right? So it kind of depends on how you look at that. I think football will always rule the day at UCF. I don't think there's ever a situation where basketball becomes this isn't going to be Kansas anytime in the near future.
At Grill in 24Q, always an interesting character on the socials. Is it realistic to think Johnny Dawkins is going to lift UCF in the best men's basketball conference in America? And then combine that with Scott 88513. Do you think next year do or die for Dawkins? I kind of posed that question. NCAA tournament or bust, as some fans are saying. Should Johnny Dawkins be back for another year, or his 1 year remaining on his contract, or perhaps an extension there? What do you think of that?
Two to unpack there. So I think for the first guy, for the grilling guy, like he just wants to hear no, right? He wants to hear Johnny Dawkins sucks and he needs to go, right? So that's my answer, just so he will get the answer he wants. But if you're going to keep Johnny for a year, right, and you're going to make him a lame duck, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand the optics or why you might want to do that, then I think you have to be very clear with what the expectations are, right? You got to be above 500. You got to make the tournament. You got to, make it to the third weekend of there has to be some sort of a mark that you have to know you have to hit, or else how are we going to decide, or how's Timo going to decide, what successes look like? So if you're going to keep him on a lame duck 1 year, I think you got to be very clear what the expectations are. So, he understands what he's coaching for at that point. Because if not, then you're going to be like, well, he won 12 games. Well, you won 8 last year. Now we won 9 this year. Now we're going to do that all year. So I think this whole situation, you put yourself in a really bad spot by not making a decision right now. It's one of those things where it's either, what's the nice way to say it? Fisher cut bait, I think is the other way to say that. I think we're in that Fisher cut bait moment at some point with Johnny that just has to land itself.
Had Joe Broback, a previous guest on Sons of UCF Live, writes about college football. What are realistic expectations for Gus Malzahn this year? A lot of fans saying 8, 9, 10 wins.
I think it's 9 or north of 9. I think are realistic expectations, right? I know you are on the record of saying that you can always pencil Gus in for 4 losses a year just based on his history. Which makes him 8-4, right? So I think you've got to get in that.
It's a 2-game improvement.
Range. Yeah, I think you got to get in that 9 range.
At 2 letters, 2 words, Robert, if the Big 12 could snag FSU, Clemson as conference members, what stipulations would you put on them as entry requirements? Well, it doesn't seem like the ACC's so-called stipulations about being in the conference for a long time matter that much. I'm not sure. What do you think? Stipulations?
I would put I'd want more money in UCF's pocket. So however we can pull that off, that would be the stipulation. Like, you get them in and somehow find a way to do something new with the TV deal where UCF's not taking a haircut the first couple of seasons, right? Like, let's get them full shares earlier on. So if you're going to open this thing back up, for UCF's best benefit is get us a full share of money or get us a better complement of money than we're getting now.
At Riley Carey 16, how do you like the baseball team so far? I like it better when they take 2 out of 3 rather than get swept on the road. They got some pop. Let's see how they do on the road. I remain in a wait and see mode. They got a top 10 RPI. But I'm still not there. I'm still not fully in yet. I want to see a little more.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic. I think there's some things to like about the team. I think they've gritted out a couple of tough wins. They seem to battle well during the midweek games, right? We've seen them pull some of those out. But to your point, they've got put together some more consistent weekends, I think, is to your point that we have to see. But I think there's hope. There's optimism there. I think pitching has to really continue to kind of be solid, particularly on the front end of the rotation. But I think there's hope there. I think there's optimism. So I'm still in the wait and see mode, but I'm trending more in a positive direction.
At Zeebel's UCF to end us here, how many Suns would it take to tackle KJ Jefferson?
How many are available?
I wrote more than what we have.
How many are available? Yeah, I don't know how many people are on staff these days with us, but we may need all of them plus. I don't know.
Those staff positions, now cost you money. This is what we're advancing.
I guess. I guess. Well, I'm gonna need to offer health insurance then, because I'm sure KJ is gonna break all of our legs as we try to tackle him, bring him to the ground.
All right. Well, how's your energy level? How you doing over there? Yeah,
I'm
voice
good.
good?
I mean, I don't know if my voice is good, but I mean,
we got a little energy for what's in the box.
I always do, Trace. Let me. So funny you mentioned that, because
yeah, I see in the comments Matt Dolan asking, is Miles the son? He needs to be there for the Suns to have a chance. That's a good point.
There we go. Charlie Hustle promo code 10-12-15. By the way, they have a sale going on right now. If you want to get to the website, you can get some merch off here. We got just a few left here, Trace. Here we go. This one looks good.
This is such a high tech. This is such a high tech part of the show.
We blew out the budget when I put this together. Yeah. All right. What are you more afraid of? 100 fire ants or 100 bees?
100 fire ants. You may remember when we were talking about injuries a few weeks back.
Yeah.
When I tore my ACL playing ultimate frisbee. The other part, the painful part of that, is that when I tore the ACL, I landed in a fire ant pile and started to get chewed on as I felt my knee throbbing in pain. So fire ants. I'm not worried about the bees. If you don't mess with the bees, I don't think they mess with you. I don't have an allergy to them that I'm aware of. I don't remember being bitten by a bee, but I think as long as you're not, waving things at them and instigating any trouble, they'll leave you alone. But the ants, they'll just chew on you.
See, I think the bee is unpredictable though. Like those things fly willy-nilly. Like they have no a desire, no path, nowhere to. You don't know where they're going. Yeah, they're a fairly quick creature as well. So if you take a couple of quick steps, they could be right behind you. The fire ants. Hopefully you can outrun those. Now I know in your case you were compromised with a knee injury, so perhaps that's why you were not on the jog there. But you can outrun a fire ant. Bee, you just step on the thing, and I think you've got an advantage there. The bee, I don't know that you can do that. So I'm going to say I'd rather not mess with 100 bees. I'd rather not have 100 bees anywhere near my life. I'm not allergic to bees. I've been stung a few times. Nothing super tragic or anything, but I think I can outrun the fire ants. So get away from the 100 bees. Get them away from me.
This particular question sounds familiar. Is this a variation of perhaps a Sun staple, 100 horse-sized ducks or something like that? Doesn't have to be.
I can't reveal the origin of the what's in the box questions, Trace. It's not part of the rules of the game. But you might be onto something. Everything that's old is new.
Yes. Yeah. Or perhaps one of your best lines ever. We just keep playing the same game.
The same game every time. It's the new name. Yeah. Right. Shh. Our secret, Trace. Our secret.
Big weekend for UCF softball hosting Texas. Look forward to seeing many of you out there at the Plex for that one. I want to thank Matt Michelle for being with us to help set the stage for the resumption of UCF football spring camp. And of course, Bowtie Ben for being with us, not just on this week's Sons of UCF Live, but all season long. Adam, thanks for hanging in there energy-wise. You brought the energy pretty well for this hour. And thank you, everybody, for watching this week's Sons of UCF Live. Go Knights!
Charge on.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. Thanks for watching the Sons of UCF Live. Go Knights! Charge on.
All right, Jan and Brett, hello. Always watching.